going forever. Bam.
Hi, this is Jules Fisher, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
This is going to be a riot, man. I love talking with people from our profession. First off, we get to talk across an ocean, a continent, and that already is crazy. But one, thanks for joining me. Two, I am thrilled to have got a chance to read your book. I'll put a link up for that here in a second for everybody. I guess you wrote a book about folks who do intel. Everybody knows I'm a former counterintelligence agent. I say spy because, let me ask you this. I say spy, and I know you spend time defining this in the book, because that is how the enemy, that is how the opposition, that is how the villages see me.
Yeah.
And if I don't start with that premise, and I'm like, oh, you don't understand, I'm merely an intelligence officer. Like that doesn't mean fuck all to them, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to act. That's the first hurdle I have to get by, because I may not be afforded cover. There's all these other things. I don't know. What are your thoughts on being direct about that?
Great. Thanks, Pete. And I mean, to start off, just to thank you for inviting me on. I'm really excited to have this conversation. We may be an Atlantic apart, but we have a shared culture and a shared language and a shared interest in something which I think is genuinely fascinating. And that's why I chose to write a book about it.
Sure.
Your question about terminology, I make a point in the book actually of writing at some length about what I mean by spy, and like you, I'm talking about the intelligence officer. Many people reserve that word for the asset, what we in the UK would call the agent, and here there is a terminology difference, because I know in the United States agent is more often used to refer to the officer. In the UK, agent is what you would probably call the asset, the source. And many people talk about the source or the agent or the asset being the spy. I don't think that's quite right. They're the insider. A spy to me is somebody who's listening in. And effectively, that's what you're doing if you are the intelligence officer debriefing somebody who's in position, giving you information. Perhaps a better word for that agent, that asset, might even be traitor. And I talk about that in the book as well, because you are asking somebody to turn against their country, against their cause, to provide you with information, essentially in support of your own national interest. So, yeah, I agree with you. Spy is the officer, the person doing the listening in.
If I was arrested, the charges would match that, what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Let me push back a little bit on if that person is a traitor or not. I worked in, just for everybody who doesn't know, and so you understand too, I worked in a tactical setting. And so every day outside the wire, as often as possible, quite often, and trying to meet people. Maybe I got to meet the same people several times. Maybe I developed a relationship over months, but then it was about to be over. And so I often had to be, and I know this is not textbook, but I often had to be the placement and access, because I may not be able to work that person for any length of time. So I had to become the source as well. And I'm not asking them to betray their country. I'm asking them to work with us in a way that, look, might expose them to danger from the antagonist, the Taliban in this case. We're talking about Afghanistan. But if I'm really crafty, I'm working within the bounds of what the Taliban allows to accomplish my mission.
I understand what you mean. And I confess, I use the word traitor because it catches attention.
Oh, for sure.
Because
Yeah.
the point I'm wanting to make is, throughout the book, and every time I talk about this, is spies, intelligence officers, do something quite extraordinary, don't they? And the best way I can sum that up is to say that they persuade other people to become traitors. Now, I agree it's a catch-all phrase, which perhaps is a little bit unfair. But it's certainly the case that if somebody who's an asset in a hostile third country is discovered reporting to you or to me or to an official from any other country, they're going to be considered as a traitor. I think that's the main point. Whether or not we see huge positives in what they choose to do, And often there are huge positives in what they choose to do, because they are electing to work on the side of good, on the side of right. The fact of the matter is, should they be caught doing it in the classic espionage setting, they would be considered traitors by the people to whom they are accountable.
Yeah, fair enough. Basically, how I treat myself, I should treat my source. Like with that perception of them being
I think that's absolutely
right.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at some of the fates suffered by famous agents in the past, they're pretty awe-inspiring. You know, the Penkovsky's fate at the hands of the Soviet Union, for instance, was horrifying. I think, because we share his ideological foundations, consider him a hero. And indeed, that was his code name. That was his CIA code name. But the way he was treated when he was discovered was as anything but a hero. He was treated as a traitor, and he was executed on that basis. And that's what I'm talking about. That what we're asking, what spies are asking agents to do, is something quite staggering, in fact, and it takes an incredibly brave person to do it. But you also said something, Pete, there that I think is very relevant. You said I should treat the person who's reported to me like I treat myself, and I think that's whether or not you meant it in this way, I think that's an astonishingly profound way of looking at it. In fact, in the end, you're two sides of the same coin, and you have as much responsibility. The officer, the spy, has as much responsibility to the safety of their agent as they do to their own safety, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be part of your calculus for sure. But even then, as I said that, it was because you inspired like that connection, right? As much as I know about our profession, I'm always, when we talk to each other, like, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right, that everything in our world is about perspectives. All of the specs, respect, introspection, circumspect, all of them you have to apply for. And I talk about moving my camera around, right? And so if I move my camera and put it over your shoulder, I'm like, oh my God, I have to act differently, because I'm acting from my own personal point of view, from my own personal needs. And the more I do that in the way that I approach the job, the less successful I'm going to be for the work that I had to do. No, look, there's strategic, there's stractical. It's crazy, but that's how I did it.
It's about empathy. It's, as you say, it's about understanding the other person's point of view. When I ask to sum up what a spy does, I always say there are three things: the self-awareness, others' awareness, and situational awareness.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's working with your own personality type, your own personality style, with others in a way that understands and empathizes with their character, their personality, their circumstances, their requirements, their motivations. And in the meantime, making sure that the situation around that relationship is, through what we commonly call tradecraft, as environmentally secure as it possibly can be. And that, to me, sums it up. And the really important point there is the middle bit, isn't it? Is the other's awareness. Unless you have an ability to understand and empathize with the needs, feelings, desires, aspirations, motivations of your interlocutor, or unless you can learn to appreciate those better, you're not likely to get very far.
Boy, you said it, man. And it's funny. So I often use the word interlocutor because typically I am that person. I am entering their world. And empathy is absolutely key for what we do, but also cultural intelligence. And so, look, I mean, the title of your book gets into alliances and influence, right? And so if you aren't culturally relevant, you cannot survive. Here is where it gets harder because, like I always talk about, like when the military is like, you must build rapport first. And so here is your rapport building card. And you go, my name is Pete. I have a family. My daughter's name is Brenna. I have now accomplished a rapport building step. On to step 2, trust. I have trust now. You know, and it's like, no. You can say cultural acuity, but you have to know how to do it. And Pete would say, you cannot show up to, you've done a lot of work in several continents. So let's just say that you're going to work in Africa or whatever it is. You cannot just show up and out Senegal, a Senegalese person. You can't out Chad, someone from Chad. You have to be yourself in that setting. So says Pete. And so when we're looking at empathy and culture, these things bond together to create the ability to possibly meet the people who might become alliances.
Yeah. A couple of points there, aren't there? One is, you're quite right, when in Rome, do as the Romans. But I really like the way that you put it, that you're not trying to out Chad the Chadian. You're not trying to out Senegal, the Senegalese person that you're dealing with. And actually, that opens up, if you think about it, a tremendous opportunity. Because yes, of course, it's important to be able to speak the local language if that's relevant. Of course, it's important to show sensitivity to the local culture. But also, a very, very important rapport building technique that I've used myself over the years is recognizing your limitations in understanding another person's culture and learning from them and inviting them to become your mentor. And that's almost feels like a reversal of the way in which the balance of power, if you like, the balance of influence. Because at one level, we like to think of the officer, the spy, always being in control of the situation, always being in control of the relationship. But in actual fact, sometimes control isn't as straightforward as visibly, manifestly exerting control over a relationship. Control can come through collaboration as much as it can come through coercion.
Yeah, that's great. There's so much to talk about here. And again, this is like us talking shop at a pretty deep level, because look, from my point of view, from working with the military, a lot of us are not trained in these things. You know, a lot of it's just on the job training, and your approach is different than my approach. Some of us shouldn't be in the field. Some of us are brilliant at maps and boxes and lines. And what it turns out that they should do is analyze the stuff I gather. I can gather things, but I'm not the world's greatest analyst, you know, and I can do it just like they can go in the field and ask questions. But when you've been in the field 200 times, you are a little itty bitty baby. You don't know the first thing. And if you don't have someone who's been in the field 1,000 times or 2,000 times to guide you in how to improve these things, and if you don't want to go through that process, you're going to be a neophyte, but think that you have chops, but you don't.
Yeah. It's about humility. It's about recognizing your own limitations. Military talks about hearts and minds, doesn't it? And that's groping towards the concept of cultural awareness and cultural empathy. But as you say, sometimes it's dealt with in a reasonably checklist approach, whereas a really solid cultivation in another culture is a baby steps process.
Right.
And part of that process is indeed a learning curve for the officer, and a careful establishment of the roles and the interaction between the two people. And there's nothing wrong with admitting you don't know. You know, that's the really interesting thing. I mean, I can tell you a story which I think illustrates this a little bit. Where it's actually from time working in Guinea, Republic of Guinea in West Africa. A private sector project, as it happened, to find out whether an international global mining company had paid a bribe to win concessions in that country. There was suspicion that they had. An investor client wanted to know whether the suspicions were correct. And I traveled there with another individual, I write about this in the book, who was a former Israeli Mossad officer. And his approach was to be very, very aloof. He spoke French fluently. He understood a great deal about the territory in which he was operating. But he came across as arrogant And he sat in the front of the car, and he put me in the back of the car alongside the person who was acting as interpreter, although he didn't actually, in fact, need an interpreter. And he treated her, Samira, with a degree of dismissiveness, which I think was just completely misguided. And indeed, by the end of our mission there, I had made a point of getting to know Samira, helping her with advising her daughter on her ambition to study in the UK, finding common ground. We both had loss and grief in our childhoods, and we'd established a really solid, strong rapport. But I hadn't approached this in any way which suggested that I was in control of the situation. I hadn't approached it in a way that suggested I was culturally masterful. I'd approached it as somebody getting to know another person. And in the end, Samira admitted to me that she'd been in the room when the official in question had asked for a bribe, and was able to tell me, because she was acting as the interpreter, exactly what passed between the CEO of the company and the official. So sitting right under his nose was the answer to the question, but there was no way on earth she was going to tell him, because he hadn't made any attempt to get to know her, hadn't made any attempt to engage with her as an equal. And I think it was a moment for me, even after many years of having done similar missions, operations, if you like, across parts of Africa. Still a moment of amazement for me that somebody who had many years of operational training and experience could get it so incredibly wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're saying that, I know that you're going to agree with this. We've all done that. We've all miscalled the person, miscalled the personality. We've missed the opportunity because we fixated on something that we thought was going to be the answer. I often liken what we do to like when you're great at it, you can bareback ride a horse, no hands, anything, just hang on with your legs, let it run crazy to where it's going to go, because no matter where it goes, you're going to be able to get something that's valuable, that answers the question. And it may not be the question, but it'll answer questions that your client needs answered. But the more you try to control it, and look, this isn't always true, but the more you try to control it, the harder it is you'll get the answer you seek, but it's nowhere near the right answer. And it's not the thing that you want to hand over to the boss and go, here's what I found out. And so because you're always spotting and assessing. And when you miss on those things, like I treat everybody kindly. I'm honest. I'm 100% honest as much as possible. And when people meet me, wherever they meet me, if they've talked about me, they're going to all know the same guy and interact with the same guy. And so when I get introduced to people and then they introduce me to people, it's often that I've now created this world where a lot of these folks all can vouch for me. And when they talk, it's not like, oh no, Pete told me this or Pete told me that. They're all saying the same things, because I've learned that those interpreters are in America, we are terrible at working with interpreters as partners. All of our training is built on a lack of trust. Don't trust them. They're trying to deceive you. You talk, they say the exact same thing. And then when they're done, you get it and you write it down. And I'm like, that is not how people talk. How people talk is like, you spend time with Samira or whoever it's going to be, and you say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I'm trying to get to. And you don't got to give all of the things away, but you try to explain. And then I empower that person over time. I build trust and rapport with them. And I'm like, I'm going to work hard, but you need to let me know if I'm working you too hard. You need to let me know if there's a holiday in your faith or whatever it is. If like one of the lessons I learned, and I'm going to shut up here in a second, was my interpreter was from Pakistan originally, lives in America, had lived in America longer than most of the soldiers he was working with. But he was still like he was still an alien for us, an immigrant. He wasn't getting enough of his food in our chow hall because we were on a remote site. And I'm like, oh my God, do you want to just go eat with the Afghans every night? And he's like, please, I'm starving. And I was like, oh my God, I never thought about that. And here I am, this high-end guy who knows how to do all these things. And I completely miss the needs of the person who I'm working with day to day. So I give them all of this liberty and I still have blind spots.
Yeah, I think that's often the case. It's very easy to miss the minor things that actually turn out to be the really major things. And often, I think you alluded to this, Pete, it's about trying too hard. It is possible to try too hard. It is possible to. I mean, my Mossad contact in Guinea was doing his very best. We were driving around from meeting to meeting, and he was spending many hours trying to hammer out the right reply. But he missed by a mile because he was trying too hard. And I don't mind admitting that I've had over the years many therapy sessions, and actually I find it's very interesting because therapy and espionage to me is very similar in many ways. And one of the things I think that is hugely similar is about that point of two things. One is the importance of the empathy and the importance of the relationship in that therapeutic setting. The other thing, the reason I raise this right now is because, to my point about trying too hard, a very fine therapist that I worked with for some years once threw me a Chinese finger trap. I don't know if you've come across these things, that they're structured in such a way you put your fingers into them, and the more you pull to release yourself, the harder it gets. And he said that's essentially what happens when we're trying too hard to manage our emotions. And I instantly saw equivalence between that and what happens when we're trying too hard on an operation. Sometimes actually sitting back and allowing things to develop in an organic, iterative manner, so long as you're being open to possibility, is much stronger than running at the answer.
Yeah. Commands, clients, they struggle with that, and so if you've done your job and you're relevant to the people who are hiring you or allowing you access to their battle space, they will be like, hey, Pete, I want you to go to Village 15 and do what you did there that you did over there. And need an answer in about 2 weeks. And it's like, whoa, I am excellent at this. 2 weeks, even if I can do it, I don't know that right now. I have to go there. And so maybe I'll be able to do it. But the benefit of what we do is when you succeed, everybody wants more of it. And they want more of you. And we quickly run out of bandwidth. And it's not something, maybe you'll disagree with me. It's not something you can reliably add someone to me and get the same kind of output, because now I'm managing that relationship too and trying to make sure that what's happening, I'm now vouching for this person's work. And a lot of times they're not going to be at my level because I'm out there for a reason. And so it is very tough to try to manage the expectations of these places when we have to take our hands off the reins and go, I have to meet 50 people in the next week to begin to understand what I need to understand so that I can possibly get to where I need to go. Maybe in 2 weeks, probably in 6 months.
I couldn't agree more. I think certainly in the private sector, that problem is writ large. That there's an assumption when it comes to private intelligence on the part of many clients that it's almost like a one-armed bandit. You pull you pull the lever and out chugs the intelligence. And they said they almost have a mechanistic concept of what intelligence gathering is about. And you get unrealistic deadlines and you get unrealistic hurdles to clear. And I spend, as a private intelligence practitioner, an awful lot of time managing my clients' expectations, and having to explain on occasion that it isn't a case of turning up in somewhere like Tanzania and asking the questions and getting the answers and flying out the following day. In a way, even just I liken it to even the sticking to Tanzania, even the beginning of a conversation with somebody in Tanzania is going to take 15 minutes of greeting, So habari yako, habari za familia, habari za kazi, habari za leo. How are you? How is your day? How's your family? And that to me is a microcosm of what the relationship between somebody who's after intelligence and the provider of that intelligence is all about. That at the end of the day, it's about the relationship. It's about a really solid, mutually respectful relationship where there isn't a first among equals. I go back to what I said early on. We're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. When we are in these spaces, we've sort of talked about elements of this. Part of what we do, and it sounds like you agree with me on this, is, I subordinate my goal, I subordinate the questions. I really need to understand who they are. And the thing that I say to get people to understand this is, you cannot presume to improve the condition of something that you refuse to understand the condition of. And we love to come in and, here's your problem, here's the solution. You're like, you don't even know me. Even if you're right, you don't have the right to put that on me.
You could get me started there on some political reflections about the relationship, particularly between Western governments, for instance, and certain developing parts of the world, where exactly that there's a sort of one-size-fits-all concept that we can provide answers, and not a great deal of respect in trying to understand the context in which the problems arise. And that again creates precisely the dilemma that I was talking about earlier, this idea that somehow there is a master and servant relationship, or there's somebody who's in control of the situation in a way which is infallible. And you know what, I genuinely believe across practically every period, every element of human endeavor, we would all achieve so much more if we could break that idea that somehow anybody is capable of ultimate control. And that humility opens the door to collaboration, and collaboration is the answer pretty much to everything.
Yeah, boy. It's a lot there. And there's so much, I don't know if you're feeling, there's so much, like, not coded talk, but there's too much talk between us where we could run off in a direction and go for the rest of the show in that one direction. But I want to kind of keep us rangy so that we can get people to understand the idea, like, what's in this book that you've written is fabulous. And again, like, we may quibble on certain things, or I might say, what about in this circumstance? But you're talking about two experts who are not even disagreeing, but saying, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? If you and I work side by side, once we understood each other, and people should understand, we don't carry a card that's like, Pete is a level 15 master spy, like that doesn't, we have to sort that out. And then you have to become uncomfortable with my approach, and then contemplate it and go, you know what? Okay, so this is the thing. I'm talking to the audience as much as I'm talking to you right now. If Jules and I sit down and it's my day, it's my meeting, Jules knows how to do it. He may take notes. He may sit there and quietly listen. He may talk to somebody, whatever he wants to do. He's going to do his part of the meeting, which is not my part of the meeting, which is the main focus. And he may listen to me and be like, Pete is going nowhere. What in the fuck is he doing? That is not how you do this. And then bam, the answer drops right in front of his face. And he's like, whoa. And it's like watching a martial art thing where you see someone who has a different technique and they're just submitting people over and over again. And you're like, I have to add, now you go like, I have to add that tool to my game. But at first you're going to be super uncomfortable when you do that. This is something that we get used to, whatever it's going to be. And so we subordinate our needs, we subordinate our ego. I'm focused on trust. If I can build trust, everything is secondary to that, because trust unlocks the box for me.
Absolutely. None of us, I think it's probably fair to say, none of us is very good at accepting that there are other ways of achieving the ends that we happen to be good at achieving. And we're all equally guilty of that fallacy. And I try to address that head on with the next book that I want to write, which is looking at spy styles. So over the years, I've seen officers from many, many different parts of the world, from very many different organizations, agencies. And the one thing I can say hand on heart is there's not really anything that unites them all character-wise. There's not one thing you can pick up on and say, okay, well, this is what makes a good spy. This is what makes a good intelligence officer. And you can have people from wildly different ends of the character spectrum achieving the same thing, this extraordinary thing, which is about building trust. And what I've been doing recently is thinking very carefully about the styles, and I think it is important to be able to try to define what those styles are without trying to suggest that they are all entirely discrete and blocked off one from another. You do have
Yeah.
migratory birds who can pick out from one style or another style and achieve incredible ends, and you do have some people who stay in their lane. But I think the important point is that they're all doing the same thing, or they're all achieving the same end through very, very different means.
Yeah.
Whether you might have somebody who's more of a confider, who's just as effective at winning trust and getting the result we want, recruiting that person to give you the intelligence you need, as somebody who's a much more gregarious, outgoing, what we would traditionally call charismatic character. One isn't necessarily better than the other. That's the point I'm making. But this person on my right hand would probably be saying, I'm much better at this than this person on my left hand. But the reality is they're equally good at it. They're just coming at it from a very, very different angle. Right at the heart of it all, though, is that concept of trust. And if you can't, trust can be won by amazingly different characters. And
That's right.
It's incumbent upon us all, I think, when looking at how others set about achieving what we think we're very good at doing ourselves, to recognize that every approach, if trust sits at the heart of it, is equally valid.
Yeah, and it's not about the time it takes to do it. If your approach took you 6 months to get there, I can't say, well, I do it faster. I mean, I can say that, but who cares? Did you get the job done? And to what quality? The time it takes to do these things, it's almost imponderable. Like so we talk about building trust. Are you familiar with Robin Dreek's work? Robin Dreek was a counterintelligence agent for the FBI. Do you know his work?
I've been introduced to his work. I haven't spent much time studying it, actually. It's on my long list of things to do.
Yeah, it's worthwhile because when I came back from Afghanistan, and I'm like, I've got to tell these stories and everything else. And I told my girlfriend at the time, I need to write a book that kind of codifies trust. And she's like, no, that book's written. And it's called The Code of Trust. I was like, oh. And so then here's the thing.
That's what it says on the tin.
Yeah, exactly. I've codified trust. And so I go and I read it and I'm like, yeah, he invented all the same things that I invented when in the field. He just wrote the book, and I give him all the credit in the world. He did the work, but he and I vibe so hard because when someone in a boardroom or in a staff room is like, okay, let's come up with the questions we want Pete or Jules to answer for us. They have no idea what questions to ask. And so I understand, like, oh, you want to know where the bombs are? Yeah, no shit. You don't have to tell me that. You want to know where the bad guy? Yeah, you don't have to. That's not all that brilliant. The questions is, how do these people operate so that I can meet the right people, so I can be introduced to the bad guy who is, more important than anything else, pliable, I've met all kinds of warlords, and I don't judge those guys. I walk in because I'm not the most important person in the room. And ultimately, I look for the KPI. So I don't ask for things that I haven't earned the right to ask for. I don't talk shop until they do. So like if we sit down over chai with an Iraqi sheikh, you're never going to, if you watched, I imagine this is true for you too, Jules. If you watched me work, you would have no idea I was working. You would think I was doing nothing. And I'll tell a story real quick and then I'll shut up and get out of the way so you can talk. I had this young officer. So the commander's like, hey, can you go sit with Lieutenant so-and-so and just help him? He's struggling with his partnership stuff. And I'm like, yeah, sure. No problem. Because this is something that we're good at. And, the lieutenant he's too raw. And so he's like, these guys don't understand what it's like to work. I'm out here all the time, blah, blah, yeah. All these things about and I hear the negative value of incompetence. So I know that there's a cultural element missing. And there's the thing that I learned is like, when you hear corruption, incompetence, stupidity, or whatever it's going to be, there's a quadrant you can look at and go, oh, they don't understand the goals. They don't and maybe they are those things, but the key is now I have an area where I can work and help. So I go with this lieutenant. We're going to go get this officer squared away, the one he's working with. And I know the whole time, like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to sit down and see what's going on and listen. So we get there, and it's right now it's Arab Cup time. So everybody's playing football, soccer,
Right.
and I look at him and he's like, see, these guys aren't even working. And it's like 8 o'clock at night, you know? And I'm like, yeah, no, they're working. And our work right now is to go watch soccer and ask questions about it. And that's all we're going to do because this, Iraq is playing in the cup right now. You think that this isn't work, man? This is the best kind of work. Is these guys are going to love us a lot more when we leave here. Our goal today is not to find out where the bombs are. It's to find out who the main striker is, or who's the guy that excites them, who terrifies them on the field from the other side. That is the work.
Yeah. It's about getting under the skin, isn't it? It's about understanding what makes somebody else tick. Because, I mean, it's like this may sound like an absolutely absurd comparison, but it's like really good house decorating. You don't, the slapping on that layer of paint at the last minute takes a matter of minutes. The amount of work that goes into it to make sure that that bit of it is apparently effortless is huge. Right. But as they say, it's all in the preparation, and I think that's true of so many things. It's all in the amount of time that you put into maintaining, building those relationships that lead to the results when you need them. Because in the end, let's face it, whether or not you're talking about espionage or business or whatever it is, in the end, you're asking somebody to do something for you. And why on earth would they do that unless there's A, trust, and B, a degree of desire to please? I think that bit is always misunderstood. That person's going to want to please you for some reason. And even self-interest isn't always going to do it. Even if there's a clear financial motivation for somebody to enter into a relationship, an espionage relationship, for instance, it's not going to be enough if they don't trust the interlocutor. If they don't trust the person that they're working with, or that's asking for the give,
Right.
And it takes a long time to build that relationship. And I've had there's a story I tell in the book about Magic. Magic was a Somali official who I spent some time traveling around Somalia with at an interesting point in that country's history, just after the fall of the Islamic Courts Union and the installation of the transitional federal government, which was backed by the Ethiopians. And he and I travelled from Baidoa to Mogadishu by road. And I call him Magic because he seemed to have this incredible way of getting us out of tricky situations. So there was a point when the driver was happily chewing cat, which is a mild stimulant, which is quite common in the region. And so busy doing that he wasn't keeping his eye on the road, because he was sitting there chatting to us in the back, or chatting to Magic, who was sat next to him. And at one point, we were hurtling towards a crater that had been left by an explosive device. And I thought, we're going straight into that crater. We're going to flip. We're going to hit the lip of the crater. And I sort of sat there thinking, God, I wish I'd phoned my mum before I got on the flight out here. And it's like one of those moments. And Magic just turned around at the moment, just at the right point, and he just said to the driver, accelerate now. And there was enough acceleration to get us to clear the crater, which was extraordinary. And then later on, we went in to meet the incoming president at Villa Somalia, and he decided that he was going to draw the meeting to a close early. Magic suggested that we leave for whatever reason. And then 5 minutes later, as we were driving away, we heard the crump of a mortar attack, and this mortar. It's exactly the room where we'd been sat a few minutes previously. So hence Magic. I called him Magic because he just seemed to have that peculiar ability to get you out of trouble at the most extraordinary moments. But he and I were friends for many years before I eventually asked him to work with me to help me better understand for my clients what was going on in Somalia. And we sat in the Karen Blixen coffee house gardens in Nairobi, in Karen, the district of Nairobi. And I asked him if he would be prepared to help me as I was setting up my own business.
Mm.
And he eventually agreed. And the reason he agreed was because we were friends. You know, there were cases I could put to him. You know, you as somebody who is involved with Somalia, as an official in Somalia, wants to bring investors in. I can help to introduce investors to the country. But none of that would have meant anything if
Yeah.
it hadn't, if I hadn't put in the hard yards. We hadn't put in the hard yards together. I
Right.
correct myself. If we hadn't put in the hard yards together, becoming friends.
Right.
Because why would he? You know, in the end, we've all got huge demands on our time. But he said
Yeah.
yes.
Oh my gosh. It's so crazy. This is just a quick anecdote, but I'll let you go after this because I know you'll be able to amplify from that. I was going to say something totally different, but that key thing right there. So I ask the Iraqi official or whatever it is, like, hey, I'd love to meet with you again. Inshallah, I understand that, but what's the appropriate way to do this? I mean, you have to be busy. You have a job. I don't need to bring a whole platoon with me, but I have to be safe. So how do you want to see me? How do you know, what's the best way to do it? And like, can you be here Tuesday morning, 8 a.m.? Yeah, you know what? My guys will pick you up at the gate. No, listen, I'm not trading my safety lightly. I've done the work to get to this point. Everything is all about like, what have you done already? Have you earned the right for this? And so when that official is like, yeah, come at this time, I'll have my guy waiting for you at the main gate. And then, yeah, we'll just drive across and then we can get things done. Meanwhile, in the American side of the thing, they're like, you know, Muhammad is a fool. That guy's an idiot. He wastes his time. He's never doing anything. So I come back from the meeting and it's like, hey, by the way, Muhammad was busy because it's annual budget time. Do you guys know what that's like? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, well, he's busy putting his budget together. Would you like to see it? This is not a question they ever knew to ask. You know, and so like we could get his budget, yeah, and you'll understand he's not an idiot. And so now maybe we can fix our side of the equation. I was always trying to balance those things out, but that goes back to what you're talking about, where I allow them to be great at what they're great at. I want to follow their path and I want to inform my people because that's my job, right? Our job, I look at it, there's four things I'm there to do. Help my boss win more and lose less, help the adversary lose more and win less. And if I can do that in a path that doesn't really harm anybody and is super easy, I'm going to repeat that path as many times as I can so that we balance the equation and we're less dominant and oppressive and getting things wrong. And we're more simpatico. We're never going to be this for long. But if I can bring this down, we'll make fewer mistakes and be more successful. That is a very boring kind of spying, but it does lead to winning.
That's interesting. You should say that. I think one of the most fascinating aspects about spying generally is the misunderstanding, public misunderstanding about it. You know, of course, we're all familiar with the Bond and the Bourne franchises,
Sure.
and there's a sort of expectation that spying is all about excitement. But actually, you and I realise that those franchises are about special forces activity rather than espionage, and people are often surprised at how pedestrian and relatively slow and careful and undemonstrative the process of recruitment is, because at the end of the day, we're talking about that, aren't we? We're talking about recruiting people to work for you willingly, in collaboration, to achieve your goals, as you say, to get the win for one side up without necessarily causing any awkwardness for the person who's helping you out to do it. Well, definitely without causing awkwardness. And the point I often make is that I frequently am invited to advise on production of spy series. You know, I've worked, for instance, on Slow Horses, the adaptations of Nick Herron books. And one of the first things I say to producers who are involved in those sorts of adaptations, or the writers who are involved in those adaptations, is, look, you've essentially got a bit of a problem when you try to visualize, when you try to dramatize on screen the espionage process, because generally it should only be visible when it's gone very, very, very badly wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's your point, wasn't it? That you're saying that quite often you're sitting there working and you wouldn't guess. I wouldn't guess that Pete's working. Pete wouldn't guess that Jules is working.
Right.
But under the surface, there's an awful lot going on because you're trying to,
Yes.
you're quietly, carefully, cautiously establishing relationships. And the one thing it isn't is visual. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really interesting thing about the whole espionage game, the whole intelligence game. It's just not visual, or it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And when it
Yeah.
is, you've got a problem.
Well, yeah, and our job is, you cannot measure the danger that our job offers. You got this great story of being in an elevator trapped with a bunch of guys who
Yeah.
aren't kind or happy about British people, right? And so we're always the hero in our own story. Of course, the Americans have come to save the day. Of course, our friends the Brits are, and the Canadians and the Aussies and the Kiwi. Of course, but the reality is not everybody wants us there. Not everybody's stoked about seeing us. Hey, they like our movies. They like to talk to us, but professionally, that causes problems for them. And so we realize that. And when we come in, I'm guessing this you kind of. I'm still an American and I'm still trying to do things, but I'm trying to do things differently than what most of us do. And I'm trying to learn how they do it. And so I'm always using culture to my advantage. Instead of, like, the example I always use about culture, and then really I'll just shut up because there's more to say, but I want to hear what you think. I was with the colonel, my colonel that I'm working with. I'm advising him. Now, I had earned the right to go on his patrols. I had earned the right to sit in his meetings because of what we're already talking about, this alliance building. And we sat with the Muqaddam, the colonel from the Iraqi side, right? And so I can't tell a commander how to run his fucking meeting. I can't do that, but I can show him what's possible. And so I want to poke a hole through his reality and let him see the light come through. So he's like, oh man, like, I'll take my gear off. I'm all geared up. I'd never wear a helmet unless I have to, right? And that's only to oblige some person who thinks I need to wear a helmet. But I want to be different. If we get somewhere and stop, if the person I'm talking to isn't wearing a kit, whoosh, my kit comes off. My kit's on the ground. I'm like, someone make sure they watch that. And I may leave and go off with them somewhere, and someone from the American side is going to mind my stuff because I have to be like them. I know that one of my key performance indicators is when, one, the American commander is like, Pete, I need your advice on this. I don't just need collection. I need you to tell me what to do. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You have a staff for that. I'm glad to work with those guys, but they'll kill me, like figuratively, if I start circumventing them and coming directly to you. And by the way, I get things wrong. And so the commander's like, I can handle that. I'll take care of that. Yes, talk to these people. And so I have built this relationship with this colonel now where I have earned the right to sit next to him. It's Ramadan. And I'm like, I need to teach this guy a little bit of a lesson, because as much as he has been there and been around, he hasn't done the field like I have. And so I say to the Muqaddam, the Iraqi colonel, I'm like, hey, it's Ramadan. I don't want to piss you off or anything. And I've got a canteen here full of water, but is it going to, keep in mind, every Iraqi I've talked to is like, we're not that religious. I don't know why you guys think we are. So I have that knowledge in my head, right? But I like to get things wrong so I can be corrected. I'm like, I've got this canteen. If I drink out of this, does that offend you? And then the Muqaddam was like, Pete, because I've been around, how about I just pull out this whiskey that's in my drawer and we just have a drink during Ramadan? And I'm like, you know what? And that's a KPI right there. If they want to drink with me, my answer is always yes. We're not going to get hammered. Sometimes we do. But then I get up, I walk across the room, I grab my shot, bam, and I do it with him. And I say, how about we do another one? And then he's like, yes, boom. Now I've done 2 shots with the colonel from Iraq during Ramadan. And I've blown my boss's mind because that is not a question he ever knows to ask. He doesn't know he has permission to do that because he's so American, he can't stop being an American.
Wow, that's a great story. And so much to unpack there. But I mean, straight away, there's an elicitation point there, isn't there? Is that a simple question of, is it okay for me to take a sip of water from my canteen? You've achieved the most incredible elicitation outcome. That guy's then shown you that not only is it okay to be consuming something during Ramadan, but also he drinks. And then you've got this incredible moment of shared experience where, almost in an illicit way, and there's 2 uses of the word illicit, you I share a slightly naughty experience. It's having a drink on Ramadan. That's a great trust building moment. You're sharing something. You're beginning to understand each other a lot better. And at no point in all of that have you been in the least presumptuous. And that's what I love about it. There's just no presumption there at all. It goes right back to what I said at the beginning, doesn't it? That it's often about being prepared to ask, being prepared to show that, to accept that you're not. This isn't your moment. You're not necessarily in control. And by ceding control, counterintuitively, you often gain a lot more control than you lose.
Yeah.
On that culture thing, there is you talked about my experience in the lift in Zimbabwe. We have an advantage in the UK in that we have the Premier League, the soccer football Premier League, because I think we all know that worldwide the Premier League is understood and followed, and that I've used that to great advantage, including in that lift, surrounded by youth leaguers who were carrying pangas, which are sort of long-bladed instruments that can be used for everything from lopping hedges to lopping heads, and often they are used in the latter way, most famously and disturbingly, I think, during the Rwandan genocide in 1994. They were the weapon of choice. So, understanding that history, to be in a lift full of people carrying these things was particularly distressing for me, and the worst, because I don't mind admitting that I'm quite claustrophobic, and I it was 50-50 about whether I was going to take the stairs, but the lights were out on the stairs, so I got into the lift. These guys had walked in after me, and then somewhere on the journey down, the lift ground to a halt because the weight was too much, and then the lights went out. And I got out my mobile phone and used a torch, and of course that just drew attention to me. And this was a group of people who are not pro-Brit, or they've been subject. To be fair, they have been subjected to many years of propaganda, anti-British propaganda. And when they heard my British accent, they saw my British bearing, if you like, they started to make life quite uncomfortable for me. And the thing that saved me was I saw just on the other side of the lift, there was a chap standing there in a suit. So that told me this guy's probably quite senior compared to everybody else in there who are wearing ripped jeans and T-shirts. But more important than that, he had a little enamel badge that just had the word United on it. And I figured that was likely to be Manchester United, which is probably the single most supported team, Premier League team across Africa. And so I simply asked them the question, how did the game go the other day? I had no idea if there'd been a game because I don't follow football as it happens. But I was right in my assumption, and he replied, actually it was a great game, and he was very positive about one player, and somebody else in the lift was less positive about that player. And before you know it, they were busy having a conversation about a Premier League football game, and little me in the corner there, forgotten about. But actually, by the time the lift had started moving again and we'd got to the ground floor, I'd become quite good mates with the guy wearing the United badge. And so, from very, very tiny things, very tiny observations, you can make an appeal to even a narrower shared cultural understanding, and that can be very, very powerful.
Yeah. That story was
thank God.
Right. Well, and this goes back to the danger thing. We're always in danger, and we have to be comfortable with that. And this is a ridiculous story, but I was talking to someone. We'll call it a source meet, but basically, I'm talking with a dude because that's my job. Meanwhile, there's other Army people doing their parts of the job, and there's nothing combat related except for we're in an area that gets hit a lot. Well, a firefight breaks out, and it's a short firefight, but it's a firefight. And while I'm talking to this guy, we're safe. We're kind of tucked in, and not by design, just because where we were standing. We're kind of tucked in between like the front of a couple of buildings, and so we're really not in the line of fire, except for like it directs towards us, not at us, but towards our
Right.
direction. And they're shooting, and bits of the building are hitting my face and the dude's face. And
Wow.
look, this sounds insane in the real world, but I'm like, we just kept going. Like, we just kept talking. And even though there's bits of the building hitting us in the face, that you're locked in. So you're under this huge danger all the time. But if you can slow down, calm down, you can look for that clue that might be the thing that it is. And maybe you don't get out of that circumstance. Maybe it does go bad. That happens. That's the nature of our job. We accept that going in. But that danger is always there. And I think when we approach it with our calmness, or excitedness, whatever. If I see someone's hands and they're excited and they're going in my direction, they're above their heart, man, I let them run with it. If they're getting excited and it's not comfortable, I am looking to try to get their hands physically, without saying put your hands down. I'm trying to get them to calm down, get their hands, and I'm trying to drive I'm not like some kind of body language expert, because I just look at it like it gives me a clue. I try to validate the clue. If I find there's something there, then I note it. Otherwise, people do all kinds of weird things with their bodies that aren't right. Like I look at faces and I'm like, that looks like a fake smile. I had a guy I was working with. We tried to understand him, and whenever he talked to us, he'd sit. We'd always sit in a chair, not on the floor, which is weird for him. And he would brace himself against his chair, like physically push and withstand the barrage that was getting thrown at him. And I'm calling it a barrage because it was a verbal barrage. It wasn't being berated, but it was like at all the conversation. When he sat with the farmers, he sat on the floor. He'd had his hand up. He'd become like a Baptist preacher. And so I'm like, so we're getting a different dude. And I tried to describe the different modes that he worked in, and when he was doing things, and when he was being productive, and when he was just satisfying us with his behavior, or just saying yes to things that he wasn't going to do because he didn't have the capacity to do them in the first. And getting the Army to understand that, man, that unlocked so much stuff for us. We were better able to align with that guy. And guess what he did with me? He's like, hey, thanks for getting the Army off my back. I want to work with you guys. Here's how I want to do it. And he said the most powerful thing I ever heard. And this is all in the same time. And again, I earned every bit of this by being deliberate and patient and making mistakes and learning from those. He said, Pete, I'm the governor here. There's only room for one sword in the scabbard. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I go to my boss and I'm like, that's what he's saying. And he's like, well, then he's the sword, and we're going to treat him like the commander and give him all the authority and respect of that position, and let him go out and muck it all up if he needs to. But we're going to come about and completely change how we do this. Now, think about that. That doesn't sound like intel, but you and I both know we won a breakthrough day.
Yeah, it's a breakthrough. And I think the thing that jumps out to me from that story is the importance of trusting your instinct. You said that you're not a great reader of body language, and I would take issue with you. We're all incredible readers of body language because we're humans, and actually, I think sometimes, again, go back to the Chinese finger trap. Trying too hard to read somebody's body language means you're quite likely to miss the really important signals. And actually, just sometimes trusting your instinct about what whether somebody means you harm, is really important. It's people talk about the hairs on the nape of your neck standing up, and you and I know that's true, and in fact everybody knows it's true. It's the thing that makes you cross the road when you see somebody that you can't sum it up, but you just don't like the look of them. And I just say to everybody, always, in every circumstance, trust it. If you feel that something's wrong, or if you feel something's particularly right, go with your gut. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn, and one that we spend many years of our childhood having hammered out of us. The other point I'd say that's really important in all of this is in Britain, British military, I understand they call it taking the knee, and of course that now has a different connotation. But the idea that when you find yourself under fire, when you find yourself figuratively or otherwise facing a threat, it's a case of lowering your profile, taking the knee, and taking a moment to consider what that threat means and responding to it rather than reacting to it. So response rather than reaction. Trust your gut. take the knee, respond rather than react. And I think those are the things that you can't teach. You have to exercise. There's only one way to do it. Now that's just to get out into the field, find yourself in difficult situations, and learn through doing. Because it's all very well to say it, but we all know that best laid plans. Well, there's a phrase that I love. It's the embaggeration factor. It all goes wrong in the field,
right?
And sometimes the only way to get used to dealing with that factor is to let things keep going wrong, and understand yourself and how you react to them.
Yeah. Do you have time for another question or two? Because this is great.
Sure.
But we're also okay. Good.
Sure.
When we look at how we approach things, one of the KPIs for me, so I talked earlier, like when the commander is like extending trust to me and give me control of meetings and saying, hey, wherever you want to go, you name it, I'm go. Okay, so that's a huge KPI, because it's easy to be the intel dude who sits in the back corner, who writes reports and thinks they've won the war, but no one even knows who they are. The commander is never like, hey, Pete, come see me. Someone go grab me. The next level of that is when the Iraqi general or the Mogadishan executive or whoever it is, when they're like, get me Jules, I need my advisor here.
Yeah.
Right. And I know you have a version of this, but when I get to that point, and I'll tell the commander, like, hey, at some point he's going to start asking for me to work with him as an advisor. And I'm not going to tell that guy no. And then the colonel's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, go do that. So not only do I predict the future and then it happens, and then the colonel hears the words, I need Pete to come back later on to be my, now that I think of it, that does with my colonel, who I have the deepest respect for, but he understands what I'm doing for his unit and his ability to tune things, And so I'm going to tell a real quick story that I'm going to shut out of the way. Before that commander got there, and before that commander got there, I had been on the ground a long time in that area. The commander before that, and we were acting like, hey, these are the Iraqis, you're a general, you're in charge, this is your battle space, I'm going to call you by your rank and everything else and treat you like, I'm going to treat you like you're higher in the organization than I am. But when the Iraqi general came to the American camp one time, it was just a clusterfuck at the camp. And he was out there, and they sweated that dude for hours in Iraq in the summertime. And he was like, why am I, if I'm the commander, why am I not being welcomed onto this camp, raced in, The other end of this story is one of the other commanders I worked with they had fuckery because the gates get crowded. There's one way in, one way out, and there's all kinds of things going on. And so he gets on the all net radio and says, this is, Jasmine 6 actual, which tells everybody that the commander is speaking. You're on the radio. Everybody listens. Everybody get the fuck out of my way. I'm leaving the camp right now. And guess what happened? Everybody got the fuck out of the way, right? We did the exact opposite to this general. And he held it against us every iteration of units coming through. And I would try to explain this to the commanders. And I hadn't figured out how to fix it because I don't know how you fix it. And we slowly eroded that anger. But every commander took on this relationship, had this huge gaping wound that they wouldn't have known. Again, this is not sexy intel, but wouldn't you want to know? And so we slowly got him to calm down about that. And we knew that. So now we aped up a meeting and said, hey, General Muhammad, why don't you come to the camp and, we'll have this meeting over here and we'll do, we'll host it this time. And I was like, yeah, good. And when he comes, everybody get the fuck out of the way. And you roll in like he's a general, because guess what? He's a general. And so when you do these kind of things, when the other general's looking at you like an asset who helps you understand his partner better, man, those alliances are so strong now, so that if I was to go back and see General Muhammad, I guarantee he'd remember me because I treated him with respect. I treated him like a general. I reduced the baggage that he got from Americans as much as I possibly could. And I became his advocate as well as my boss's advocate. And that's the essence of what you're talking about. If you can translate that into business, oh my God, I'm going to shut up now.
I mean, the word you use there, which I want to seize on, is respect. Have a think about what my Mossad friend did. It wasn't so much what he did; it's what he didn't do. He failed to show respect to Samira. Now, actually, I think he was wrong anyway, regardless of the fact that she was the source of information which he desperately wanted to know. He wasn't to know that at the time. Also, doesn't matter. It played in my favor that she happened to know that information, but I'd have treated her with respect anyway, as I hope I would treat anybody with respect.
Right.
And it's such an obvious thing that I'm amazed at how few people who consider themselves leaders don't understand that.
Yeah.
That it's simply about showing respect, and that moment of human to human interconnection is vitally important. I mean, I've had various different jobs over the years, and I was working for an international bank at one point, and I was pretty junior. I happened to be in the lift when the CEO of the bank got into the lift with me, and he asked me my name, and he said, I'm going to get my, and he asked me what I did, and we had a brief chat about it, and he said, I'm going to get my PA to give you a call a little bit later this morning to arrange a time for you to come up and chat to me. I was like, good heavens, why? What does he want? And so due to, waited my call, and the PA called me, and I scurried up there at the appointed time. And I said, so, what can I do for him? He said, oh, nothing. I just want to have a cup of tea with you and have a chat and see what your experience of working at this bank is like. Simple as that.
Right.
Made a huge difference to the way that I felt about not only him, but the way I felt about my employer generally, and about that brand as a whole. And I can't emphasize enough how important those moments are. Just taking, and again, it's taking a step back. It's not running at the response, not running at the answer. And for somebody that busy to take 10 minutes out, he would have got something out of that. I would have said something to him that he would have thought, okay, actually, that's quite important, and maybe I need to adjust the way in which we operate. And that's the really important thing. So that respect, properly grounded, sincere respect, can make all the difference in relationships that could be absolutely vital to our success or otherwise. And vital, and this is the point about think like a spy. I don't mean this just in the espionage context. It's in every context. And the really important point that I make throughout the book is, these skill sets, and I break them down into the target profiling, cover, cultivation, elicitation, motivations, pitching, influence, debriefing, detection of deception, control of the environment. They are absolutely vital to the agent recruitment cycle, but they're just as vital in every relationship that we build, particularly in professional context, but also in personal context, so long as you're not abusing it. And I absolutely am clear that this is about collaboration rather than manipulation. Those skill sets they're not to, they're not, no intelligence service, no spy has a monopoly on those skill sets. Everybody has access to those skill sets. They're human skill sets. And what I was I've been incredibly lucky. I came from a very humble background, a fantastic background in many ways, but certainly not one that was wealthy or hugely privileged in social terms. But I met people along the way who taught the importance of strong alliances and collaboration, and it made a huge difference to me. And as a consequence, I've had the most amazing, fascinating, not necessarily remunerative, but very entertaining career. And I think I'm very, very lucky and fortunate. I wanted to share that. So through writing the book, I'm attempting to democratize that skill set, because it isn't just about spying. It's about every interpersonal interaction you ever have, in fact.
Yeah. There's so much in there, and the book is full of these things. By the way, the link for the book is right there, you guys. It's in the remarks. It's also in the show notes. So if you guys want to get the book, which I highly recommend, you will learn, if you can apply the lessons that Jules offers, you'll be able to apply them directly to your interpersonal relationships. sometimes it's just something simple. And again, this is in your book. You talk about how you developed your relationship with Winston Churchill, not the Winston Churchill, but
Yes.
one of his offspring. Anyhow, I would tell like my military units, like, hey, we're walking through these villages, right? Smile, wave.
Mm,
By the way, kids wave like this. This is where we are. Kids
mhm.
wave like this or hi like this. Men wave like that. They just put the hand up. And so if you do that, you're saying, I see you, I acknowledge you. I hope you have a
I,
good day. You don't got to
I,
do all
res-
that. You don't
I,
got
re-
to.
I respect you.
Good.
That's what I'm saying. I
Yeah, I
respect you.
respect.
I respect your
Yeah,
culture. I respect you, and I see you as a person. I see you as a fellow human being, and that's what this is
right.
about reaching out. There are, what I say, 8 billion of us on the planet, and that's an awful lot of personal ambition. That's an awful lot of personal motivation. That's an awful lot of personal desires, grief, loss, and
Right.
every single one of those human emotions is equally valid, and it's just incumbent on all of us to show that we recognise that and interact with people with that degree of respect and humanity.
Yeah.
Because I believe that's what makes the difference. It makes the difference at the aggregate level, but for our
It
present
does.
purpose, it makes an
Yeah.
incredible
Yeah.
difference at the personal level.
The other side of that whole philosophy of smile, wave, say hi,
Mm,
then you have a bunch of infantry guys who are like, I threw rocks at dogs yesterday. And you're like, stop,
mm,
do not throw rocks on a patrol. What are you doing? These guys, if they don't care about us, they will absolutely comply, actively
mm,
place bombs. Like, again, you're talking about intel. That doesn't sound like intel. But if I can get the neighbors to be like, these guys are a nuisance, let them go through. They're generally nice boys, then
mhm.
that we are now winning more and losing less, and so all of that goes into that 8 billion people here. Like, just start with, look, you can always be direct and controlling. You can always switch to that tool, right? And so many young people in this field will like look to manipulation, like they want to become a master manipulator. And
Yeah,
like, hey, God bless,
right.
maybe you'll become that one person. But for the most part, it is a rough, abrupt, fraught with error kind of approach to things, as opposed to, let me take time, let me learn your culture, let me take your cultural path to accomplish my goal. It's like no fingerprints, anything. They'll do the job for you if you allow them to. But first, you have to earn that right.
I'm going to get a little bit spiritual on you now.
All
Um,
right, I love it.
I think the really important point about everything you say there as well is, this idea of being a master manipulator, a master influencer is all about getting to our goals. Uh, I'm a great fan of John Kabat-Zinn, the writer who and
Right.
and teacher of the art of mindfulness. And what he says is, often we are more human doing than human being.
Mm,
Because we're so busy trying to get to our goals that we forget to be present in the moment. And what you're talking about there, taking that time to understand and to interact with people in a meaningful, mindful way, is a goal in itself. That's part of the point of existence. And it's not, obviously, yes, it's great. We all want to achieve the things we want to achieve. But if you can be mindful about the importance of the human relationships that you're enjoying in the moment, you're winning anyway.
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that's a win. You can chalk that up, whether or not you actually get to your goal, because you've done something meaningful in seeking to have a, a, an empathetic relationship with another human being. Because in the end, that's all we are. We're just 8 billion human beings trying to get along together as best we can.
Yeah. Man, oh man, that's so good. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I have to say one more thing. Uh, if you want to accomplish your goals, before you ask, look, this is the norm. Do whatever you need to do, advance the speed, but the elegant way to do it, the way that has a lot of efficiency and packed with density, is to do all the other things first. So before you ask for things that you need
Mm,
and split out what your goals are, understand your partner's goals. Understand how they make
yeah,
decisions.
exactly.
Understand where their fear is. If they're not worried about their job and they're worried about something at home, then that's where your attention is going to be. And then when they're like, Pete, you always listen to me. What do you
Mhm.
need? How can I help you? Boom. Now you say exactly what you need because you know what to ask for, and be bold about that. Be like, you know what I need? I need $1,000. I got to fix my car. Man, that $1,000 will show up fast if you do that.
Yeah. Active listening, I think, is probably the key lesson in all of that. And I talk about it in the book again. It's that if we can genuinely teach ourselves, and it is something you have to work on, to listen actively to the person you're with, you are winning anyway. I mean, that in itself is a magical thing, because you know, even if nothing comes of it, you've learned something, and it's something you can use. You don't even need to be able to verbalize it to yourself. It's just something has embedded itself in you from that latest interaction, regardless of its outcome. And if you can start to think about life like that, again, go back to that finger trap. So don't enjoy the moment of building the relationship, building that interpersonal warmth, because that in itself is what we're here for.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds a little bit sort of new age and a little bit spiritual, but you know, in the end, the important thing about intelligence work is it's all, and the intelligence work I'm talking about, of course, is human intelligence. It's all about human interaction.
Right.
So master that, and the rest should come relatively easily.
Yeah. Yeah. The book, the link for it is right down here. It's called Think Like a Spy, Master the Art of Influence and Build Life-Changing Alliances. I have to read slowly because my eyes have cataracts on them right now.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's all right. It's a result of doing spy stuff. You know, the lessons in there are so powerful. And we could do, I already want to say 5 more things to you, but I'm not going to take you through that right now, because there's so much greatness.
Me too. I mean, we could go on for hours. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's fantastic to have. It's always such an honor and a privilege to talk to somebody where you find yourself on the same wavelengths, and you've, as you say, you know, we might not agree about everything, but we have a shared cultural understanding of something.
Yeah. The best way to learn how to be a good spy is to talk to good spies and just try what they do and make a lot of mistakes. Oh my God. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap this up. I'll say goodbye to you in a second, but everybody else, listen, this is the Break It Down show. And all you got to do is click subscribe if you want to. The best way to help me is the PayPal link. That's down below. It's Zoom and Buy. Just go to breakitdownshow.com and hit that. Or just listen. Just enjoy yourself and let me know what you think. You can always reach out to me, Pete@breakitdownshow.com. The whole point of this thing is to give you guys access to all these incredible people, people like Jules. It's an amazing opportunity if you choose just to go on a journey with us, or look, just apply it to your business things and get his book, and that will help you. And you know what I always say about these books? Buddy, read it. Buy one for you, buy one for a friend. That way you buy 2, and you guys can talk about these things, because the best way to learn, again, from these things is to have human interaction around them. So, Jules, thank you very much. I'm going to press the stop button. Everybody else, have a great weekend.
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today, and I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now,